and welcome to another edition of Nebraska Football Now. I'm your host, Andy Classen, joined again by Jake Bartecki. Jake, are you hanging in there? Are you okay?
I'm doing fine, man. Hey, it gave us something different to kind of cover and ask about this week at media availability, that being, of course, a near 50-point loss, but it gives us a lot to talk about here today, doesn't it?
It sure does. So let's start right there. What happened? I mean, things got off the rails in a hurry, and they stayed off the rails in Bloomington, Indiana. I think everyone could understand if Nebraska were to lose, right? They were about a touchdown point underdog at kickoff, but to see things unfold like that right from the get-go and really just never get better, get worse, in fact.
I didn't see a 50-point loss coming. I mean, I'll be really honest. I know Matt Rhule said the same thing after the game and caught a lot of flack for it and saying, I didn't see this coming, but and again, I picked Nebraska to lose last week, but I did not see them losing 56-7. It was concerning to me. Nebraska looked slow. They looked flat. And this is all coming out of a bye week as well. I think during warmups, they looked pretty charged up, ready to go. Things didn't seem all that different to me there. But they took the field and they got beat up pretty good. I mean, Indiana punched them right in the mouth. Indiana out-coordinated Nebraska. They were more aggressive than Nebraska. And there was a lot of talk all week of Nebraska should play Indiana the same way you played Colorado. Well, the difference between those two teams is while Indiana throws the ball and spreads the offense out a lot, similar to how Shadir Sanders and Coach Prime does it over there, Colorado doesn't run the ball like Indiana does, and thus we saw Nebraska up their first rushing touchdown. So really unfortunate, and unfortunately the road doesn't get easier for Nebraska because now you're taking out a top 5 team. Yeah,
and Coach Rhule straight up said that. He goes, even up to kickoff, I thought the energy was good. I thought our guys were ready. You know, he was hugging and dapping players. Let's hear from the head man himself right now.
To me, this happened to us. We allowed it to happen. It stunk. It hurt. We'll find out a lot about ourselves moving forward. You know, we'll find out about the coaches. We'll find out about the players. We'll find out about me. The last thing we're going to do is sit around and be victims.
So there you have it. A little bit of he had some time to think about it. It was an early week press conference there. He kind of knew the questions that were coming his way. Yeah. But I feel like there's still more questions than answers, Jake.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions in terms of things like what happened with the defense. And, you know, there's so many things you can look at. And I think part of the reason we're still looking for so many answers is so many things went wrong. I thought the secondary and the cornerback play was exposed pretty good. I mean, in the middle, down the sidelines, I thought Indiana's wide receivers got way too much separation. I also don't understand why Nebraska didn't blitz more, because I thought when they did bring a blitz, and I point to this play in the first half when Mekhi Bear got to Carter Rourke for a sack, I'm thinking, you know, this is back-to-back plays where you brought pressure and you've gotten to the quarterback. Do that more often, because I sort of think Nebraska's best defensive success came from when they pressured, and that's been the story all year. We just didn't see that against the Hoosiers.
You know, that's a great point. We're always kind of hanging our hat on our defense, particularly our rushing defense, and the big fellas up front and some of our linebackers that are upperclassmen now. 5 rushing touchdowns, 33 attempts for 215 yards. That's over 5 yards per carry. It was over 9 yards per carry in the first half. It felt like not only did they get out-coached, but Indiana came with a curveball. Hey, rather than pass, we're going to run the ball. And Nebraska never did make the adjustment. Players, coaches, once again, it just felt like the train got off the tracks and no one just took a deep breath and tried to better the situation. What did you make of that as far as just the total collapse? Well, let's hear from one of the captains.
Yeah, go for it.
Isaac Gifford earlier in the week here at the press conference.
You know, I know our run defense hasn't been great this year, but it hasn't been like that, right? So obviously that's what stood out the most.
Just tackling or identifying?
Yeah, I think it's tackling is one of them, and then there's too many one-on-one tackles. You know, that's not what we do here in Nebraska. We swarm the ball, and we didn't do that.
All right, Jake, so now I'll go to you. After hearing those words from one of our defensive leaders, been there a long time, what do you make of those type of comments? Because for me, it's starting to just sound more and more like things that we've heard from the Scott Frost era and even before that. Like it's just rinse, repeat, we're going to get our tails kicked.
Well, and one of the big things that we've always thought about going back to Scott Frost's days here in Lincoln are the tackling. And Isaac Gifford kind of stole what my answer to your question was going to be. I thought Nebraska's tackling was awful. I mean, they had 11 missed tackles. That's a season high for them this season. And a lot of that is because Indiana made some nice plays where it made the tackles difficult to make, like some of those passes to the receiver were open in space, and it left Nebraska's defenders trailing, and they couldn't make a clean grip and bring the guy to the ground.
Yeah.
Same deal in the run game, though. They were getting run over, and they were running to where the defenders weren't. So I really hope this week in practice, and I'm sure it will be with Tony White, that's an emphasis in the tackling.
Do you think there needs to be a change looked at maybe scheme-wise? I know we like the 3-3 stack, and it's fun, but if you're not going to be blitzing and being aggressive with that three-man front, should we move to a four-man front? We know we have some really good, big defensive linemen, interior linemen, and big guys on the edge as well. Is that something that you've heard? I mean, you're around the program. Is that something they are considering?
I really couldn't tell you. Really, it should have been a question that probably should have been asked this week at media availability with Tony White. But I will say it can't hurt. People bring up the point of who are you going to move on the defensive line. And I think you can put any number of guys there. The guy that I would point to would be James Williams. I think then you go Nash, Ty, Jamari Butler, and James Williams, who had a monster of a game, graded out super high against Rutgers. And you could also move somebody like MJ Sherman to the edge or Princewell Uman-Yellen, because you've got guys who can back up those linebackers like Javen Wright and guys to his liking. So you've got options. I don't know if Ohio State week is the week to try it. Maybe it is if you're getting the doors blown off you in a blowout. But I also sort of feel like you try that against somebody where you have a better matchup, offensive to defensive line.
Well, you thought they had a better matchup against Indiana.
Right.
And I also don't want to hear who you're going to bring down, because in the 3-3 stack or any 3-4 type of defense, a lot of times you are bringing an outside linebacker down to serve as a defensive end.
Right.
And Nebraska should have options, and does. We have a lot of good players, and we've been told it's depth.
Yeah.
It reminds me of how we hear about we want to be a rushing team. We want to run the ball. And then we see early in the first half when we're down, I felt like we panicked and we threw the ball 8 times in a row when we got down by 7 points. How can you say we want to be a rushing team and then throw the ball like that early?
I think it's because Nebraska doesn't know what they want to do. I don't think they have an identity. I really don't. And, Marcus Satterfield made it clear this week that I think he wants to establish the run more. But it took 20 games of him being here to kind of make that decision, which I think is a little worrisome. This team, in their last 19 Big Ten games, are you ready for this? Is averaging 13 points per game.
Yeah.
That is just not going to win you football games in this league. It wouldn't have won it when it was 10 teams, 14 teams, 18 teams. That does not win you football games. Yeah. So you got to figure out a way. And here's another thing, too. These 2 wide receivers that you presumably probably had a pretty penny to get NIL-wise in Isaiah Nayor and Jamal Banks, have struggled to get separation. So maybe Garrett McGuire needs to look at a few different things and change up a few things in practice to give Dylan Raiola more options if they do elect to start throwing the ball more.
I love that you bring that up, and I don't even mind putting the NIL talk into it, because now we're big boys, right? There's money involved, so we can't actually point to these guys. Banks has 3 or 4 blocking in the back, holding penalties, and that's been a discussion early on. And I feel like now you can say, okay, you're benched, you're cut. Scholarships were always a 1-year contract, if you want to use that language, anyway.
Yeah.
Now with NIL, I feel like you should have the freedom to move on from a guy, try an underclassman even more so. That might not be a popular take, but that's how I feel. What are your kind of initial thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, you got to look at who you have. If you want to go to an underclassman, you've probably got Ja'Cory Barney Jr., who gets a lot of reps already, and then you've got Carter Nelson, who's usually a tight end, but they've lined him up at receiver because Fidoni's taken the tight end reps this year. And Carter Nelson got 18 reps. I think his snap count was at 18 for the Indiana game, which was the most he's gotten this season. Yeah. But I got to say, I mean, the perimeter blocking, glad you mentioned that, because that's something for Nebraska, because they do an intermediate passing game or a short outlet passing game to guys like Jalen Lloyd or Ja'Cory Barney Jr. Yes. You got to have that perimeter blocking to set things up. And I point to the Colorado game when Ja'Cory Barney had the touchdown called back because of a holding and then a perimeter blocking penalty. And I think one of them was on Jamal Banks. That's been a problem all year. And as we get to the second half of the season with some tough games coming up, it's got to get better.
Okay, so we're talking about the offense. Raiola had some words to say at his presser. Everybody's kind of looking at him now, and I feel bad for the kid. But it felt like since halftime of the Colorado game, him along with the offense have been in a total decline, a regression. Let's hear from him real quick here.
It's just little things here and there that kind of get you in the big games. So I think just cleaning up the little things, and we have another opportunity this week to improve and go 1-0.
Okay, Jake. So he's trying to stay upbeat. He's
Sure.
searching for answers. Much like Matt Rhule, Coach Rhule, I like what he has to say. It sounds good, but you still got to go out and then do it. What are your thoughts as far as can they get right? Is he just a freshman? Do we need to give him some more grace? I think there's a lot of different things that can be true at once here.
Yeah, I agree. I was going to say, I think it's a mixture of all of those, to be honest with you. I think he is still Dylan Raiola. I think we've seen enough to believe that he is the quarterback that Nebraska brought here to be the guy and to be the starter in his freshman year. Mm-hmm. So I still have a lot of faith in Dylan Raiola. I just sort of think he seemed a little indecisive to me against Indiana. And the other thing, there's opportunities there. I mean, he's not a running quarterback, right? I mean, that's just not his game, and it's never been his game, even going back to high school. But there's opportunities, I think, for him to pick up a first down on 2nd and 5 or 3rd and 4 with some open room, just run and scramble. I mean, we saw Patrick Mahomes do it against San Francisco this weekend. Right? Mahomes kind of showed that you don't have to be a running quarterback to use your legs and make it effective in the offense. Right. I'd like to see him maybe try and tuck and run and pick up a first down every so often. And we talk about the hard part about giving him targets because those receivers in Nayor and Banks have a hard time getting separation from the defenders, so he's kind of just taking the best available options.
So with maybe the worst loss since 2004 where Texas Tech hung 70 points on the Huskers, does this reset the expectations?
A bit. Yeah, a bit. I mean, at the beginning of the year, I had Nebraska at 8-4. I believe I had their losses as Illinois, Ohio State, USC, and Wisconsin. So I had them winning this football game. But I think it doesn't change it a ton, probably down to 7 now for me, because I do sort of feel like this game was so bad, it was almost an outlier to me. And I know that a lot of people are going to disagree with me on that, but I sort of feel like everything was so poor in this game all around for Nebraska that I think it really will be their worst game of the season. I don't think they can play worse than this. And that's why it changes the expectations. It's not the loss that changes the expectations for me. It's the way they lost and how they lost, getting blown out. That's what concerns me, and that's why I just think it changes it, but it only drops it down in win total by a game for me.
I like that idea because there are some times where, and I've been part of some teams where just throw the tape away. You got to get rid of that game. You got to forget about it. That might be the thing that Coach Rhule wants to do this week. Speaking of the game coming up, we've alluded to it. Let's talk about it. Ohio State, 25.5-point favorites. They're coming off a bye.
It's just crazy.
A 1-point loss to Oregon. I think they're going to be laser focused right now. And I think they might, if they're even paying attention to Nebraska, they might smell some blood in the water, and they might want to get on the Huskers early. I really feel like this 25.5-point spread.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was looking on the CBS Sports app. You can click on the game, and it shows you where the money is on the spread. And there's a lot of people. I think about 60% of the people were on Ohio State minus 25.5, which is just crazy. I mean, that's a huge point spread.
Yeah, and we've seen it earlier this season. Vanderbilt was a 23.5-point dog to Alabama, and they won. Yeah. But this would be a bigger upset by 2 points. Yeah. Nebraska losing to Ohio State is just I think everyone.
And I think people probably would have thought Nebraska would have been better than Vanderbilt coming into the year.
Exactly. There's a different expectation there, whether you like to admit it or not, with the traditions and all that type of stuff. And I don't think anybody was thinking Nebraska was going to beat Ohio State, but we wanted to be competitive. Can we at least do that heading into this one, going on the road?
Yeah, I think there's things you've seen in games already this season that would show you. I mean, I point to the Colorado game, the defensive effort in that one, and shutting down most of what they wanted to do. Travis Hunter had 110 yards in that game, but it came out, I think, 11 catches. So, it was they protected the big play, which I think was a big thing against Colorado. And this Ohio State team, I mean, you saw the number 1 offense in the Big Ten last week. You're going to see the number 2 offense in the Big Ten here this week. So over 500 yards per game, over 43 points per game. I think Nebraska can be competitive, but they're going to have to play eons better than they did in Bloomington.
Let's talk about the quarterback transfer.
Sure.
Will Howard. I think he's done a fantastic job. I know he caught a lot of heat at the end of the Oregon game, but up to that point, up to that one play, I think he's just done a fantastic job. He's changed the offense in ways.
Yeah, they look similar to how they did last year with Kyle McCord. Will Howard doesn't run the ball a lot, but more than McCord did. I think he's got 33 carries for 77 yards this season, so about 2 yards per attempt, which is, about what you would expect, I think, from a quarterback. It's different than what they've looked like in the past, because when Nebraska's played Ohio State in past years, I think the last time the quarterback we played him was, I think it was Justin Fields.
Yeah, he had a good day.
He had a good day. But, the difference is the last two quarterbacks the Buckeyes have been Justin Fields and C.J. Stroud, who both have done pretty well for themselves in the NFL.
Right.
But, run the ball a lot more, and I think Will Howard is less of a threat.
All right, well, let's get into predictions.
Let's do it.
What's your prediction for this Ohio State game? They are coming off of a bye.
I'm going to take Ohio State 34-17, so that covers the spread for Nebraska. Okay. I think they respond. I think we'll be entertained for 3 quarters, and I just think Ohio State's going to have a few too many plays and a few too many playmakers for Nebraska to win it.
Well, I hope you're right. I hope we hang in there and play well. I was Mr. Positive Guy last week. I thought they would win it outright, easily cover the point spread there. That wasn't even a question for me. This week, I think Ohio State is going to win. They're going to win by a lot. I'm going to say 42-10. Matt Rhule is going to kick the field goal this time. Game's going to be out of hand, so there'll be no pressure. Nobody will be tuned in. So we will get that field goal, Jake. Give it to me, 42-10.
All right, well, I would have a field goal in mine as well.
Very good, very good. Any last thoughts before we wrap this thing up?
Everybody enjoy the game. It's going to be an interesting one. I'm not going to promise too much, but I know we'll be excited to tune in.
Well, Jake, thank you for your time and sharing all that wonderful information. And thank you for joining us on another edition of Nebraska Football Now.